today we live in the world of data and AI, right? So it's everywhere. We hear about that word a lot. And if you wear your statistician hat, you said yes, coin toss and CEO, coin toss wins because I don't have to pay anything to the coin toss. But then what you're saying when you wear your sort of organizational psychology hat, right? And you say, imagine an organization with no leader, right? So imagine the physiological or the mental changes that happens in an organization when you realize the topmost guy is just a coin toss, right? And that you cannot quantify with any research, right? Because that's the emotional, that's the well-being, that's the Maslow's hierarchy that you're totally missing out on once you take the leader out of that equation, right? And I think from that vantage point, I totally agree with you that having a leader, it has the non-verbal cues that are defining that organization is probably doing a more impact than sort of those statistical anomaly or a statistical significance on the success or the failure of an organization.
Right. Yeah, they've studied engagement, and the research is beginning to show that people don't stay at a company because of the CEO unless they work directly with the CEO. And then the influence is very important. But once a company becomes, and I shared this with my client who was getting to be 100 people, 200 people, 300 people, they like to know what the CEO's vision is. They want to hear it. But the reason they stay with the company is because of the leader of their team, the leader of their close-knit community. And it's interesting because intuitively, if you step back and you think about it, human beings are tribal. So if your CEO is 3,000 miles away and he is not on video talking to you every other day, then the person you really care about is who is your day-to-day team. And do you trust them? Do you feel safe with them? Can you try out new ideas with them? Can you have an impact on them? And that's going to help you decide whether you stay with the company and whether the company is where you want to have a long-term relationship. And a lot of the things that we used to think were key to success, like paying people more money, beyond a certain point, it's not anywhere near as influential. So
interesting.
It's interesting.
And I'm curious to know your point of view on, so is a good led organization more like a king or an autocracy or in so let's take the negatives out. Let's just say there's a king, right? And so say there's a meritocracy that exists there. Or do you think it is a democratic system of lot of elected officials? When you think about a good led organization, do you know like which kind of model resonates better with a good led organization? I'm curious.
I mean, the way that I would answer that question is that there are strengths and weaknesses to both authoritative organizations, hierarchical organizations, and democratic participative organizations. The authoritative organization is very good in an emergency. Think about it. If you're flying a plane, you want the person in the pilot's seat to be authoritative. If you're having surgery, you really hope that the surgeon is running the show, right? You don't want him to be a Democrat, democratic. You don't want him while your body's open to be saying, so should we do this? Why don't we vote on whether or not this person is going to, you don't want that. But on the other hand, if you're trying to run an organization to come up with creative ideas, be innovative, which is what we need in today's world to solve all the huge issues, economic issues, social justice issues, environmental issues. If you're really trying to be creative, then you don't want a pyramid with just a few smart people at the top because you're not getting the talent from everyone. So a much more creative way of organizing would be a democratic or a consensus-driven organization where you encourage people to step up with their ideas because you really want to get the creativity from as many people as possible. So I think it really depends on the context. But I would summarize by saying that where we're headed and what I pointed to in my book is that the human race on planet Earth does not have the luxury of it anymore of just being top down. We have to become more democratic because we really need to listen to the talent that we have in order to solve all the problems. So it's almost like it's flipped. It used to be that you could run an organization for hundreds of years with fairly simple group at the top, but that's not going to be sustainable. So now I think we have to, as organizations, as entrepreneurs, hopefully even as countries, we have to start to broaden out our acceptance of leadership from around the company, from around the group, not just from the top.
So if we see organizations today, right? So we even started to hear flattening of an organization again, decreasing the depth and making it more broader. So in that construct, how is leadership being changed, or leadership needs to evolve? I'm always curious. So if there's a chain of command, you know who to go. Like there's a chain of command, and its chain is well established. Whatever is going on in a flattening organization, many times it's slightly broad when it comes to. Um, so how are the leadership landscape change between these two templates of say IBMs of the world versus maybe now where Apple is heading to? It's still not there, but more sort of flattened and more sort of out. I'm curious.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's a great question. I think the simplest way to understand the shift in energy is, and I do this with all of my clients that are very senior leaders, because they are in the middle of this that we're talking about, right? Is to step back and reflect on the distinction between power over others and power with. And being in a dynamic where you are empowering others to work with you in a partnership, in a collaborative dynamic, does not mean that you give up power. It's sharing power. It's supporting the empowerment of others. But if there's an emergency, or if there's a crisis, or there's a really difficult decision, you can still take back the power, or you can serve it up to the others and say, you know what? I think you're the most expert person on this subject, so I think you should have the power over the decision. But the core theme is really the awareness between the distinction of power over and power with. And the more that leaders, whether it's in an IBM or a startup or anywhere else, the more they become aware of that, then they can choose, because at the end of the day, it's really about a choice. What is the kind of power that's going to work most effectively in this situation? And then they can decide minute by minute. And I literally mean minute by minute. I mean, the other theme of my book is leadership agility. And agile leaders can do power over in the morning and power with in the afternoon. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be 3 months of power over and 2 months of power with. I mean, it can be minute to minute. And I have a case study in my book that I wrote about, which was one of the things that started me on that journey, was that I worked with a surgeon at a very prestigious hospital. And he was very power over at 7 o'clock in the morning because he was saving lives. But at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when he was leading a meeting with his colleagues, it's completely different energy.
Interesting. Wow.
He stood back, he handed off the power, and he was a collaborator, he was a listener. So it can be both.
I think
which is a really big step for a lot of leaders.
Yeah. Well, I think